They called him a ghost, a myth, a cautionary tale for children afraid of the dark. But the sinister truth behind the Headless Horseman is far more disturbing than the story you grew up with. Behind the galloping hooves and the flaming eyes lies a hidden warning, one carved into the darkest corners of American history. Sleepy Hollow was only the beginning. Before we unravel the truth, make sure to subscribe to this channel for more unsettling legends, forgotten histories, and dark revelations that challenge everything we thought we knew. Leave a comment if you've ever questioned a childhood story, because what if the Headless Horseman wasn't just chasing Ichabod Crane, but chasing something inside all of us? What if the legend we were told was carefully crafted to hide what really happened? The tale begins in the quiet town of Sleepy Hollow, where superstition hung heavier than fog, and every rustle in the woods made hearts race. A place where fear wasn't just a feeling, it was a way of life. And one night, that fear took the form of a horseman who had no head and no mercy. Now let's revisit the story as you know it, and see where the cracks begin to show. In the small, eerie town of Sleepy Hollow, nestled among the hills and fog-drenched woods of New York, lived a lanky schoolteacher named Ichabod Crane. He was known for his superstitions and awkward manners, often spooked by the whispers of haunted forests and ghostly lights in the distance. By day he taught children and courted the beautiful Katrina Van Tassel. But by night he walked quickly past the churchyard, glancing over his shoulder, terrified that something might be following him. The villagers warned him about one thing in particular, the Headless Horseman, a phantom rider who appeared when the moon was high and the wind was still. According to local legend, the horseman was the ghost of a Hessian soldier, decapitated by a cannonball during the Revolutionary War. His body was buried in the church graveyard, but his head was never found. Now, they said, he roamed the woods in search of it, riding on a black steed as fast as thunder, wielding a flaming pumpkin where his face should be. He would appear without warning, galloping through the mist, chasing anyone who dared to travel alone. To encounter him was a curse. To look into the hollow where his head should be was to see death itself. Ichabod, fascinated and horrified by the tale, tried to laugh it off. But one night everything changed. After a party at the Van Tassel estate, he rode alone through the woods on his borrowed horse, Gunpowder. The moon cast long shadows across the narrow path. Twigs snapped, hooves echoed, and then the sound stopped. All at once, Ichabod saw it. A towering figure on horseback, cloaked in black, holding a flaming object in his hand. The rider had no head, and yet he seemed to be staring straight at him. Without thinking, Ichabod spurred Gunpowder forward. But the horseman followed relentlessly. Through twisted trees and narrow bridges, the chase unfolded like a nightmare. Ichabod's heart pounded louder than the hoofbeats behind him. As he approached the church bridge, the supposed safety point, he glanced back. The Headless Horseman hurled the flaming pumpkin toward him. Everything went black. The next morning, Ichabod was gone. Only a shattered pumpkin and a trampled saddle remained. Some believed he had fled in fear, never to return. Others whispered that the horseman had finally claimed another soul for the graveyard. No one knew for sure, but the story spread like wildfire. Over the years, the tale became immortalized in books, films, and Halloween decorations. The Headless Horseman was turned into a spooky mascot, a harmless ghost story, a shadow of the original warning. Children dressed like him in October. Adults chuckled at his legend. Few paused to consider what or who might have inspired such a figure of dread. The story of Ichabod Crane became a charming Gothic tale, wrapped in nostalgia and pumpkins. But something crucial was lost in the process, the reason the legend began in the first place. What truth had been buried beneath the theatrics? And that's where things get unsettling, because while the version we know is haunting, it's also carefully crafted, smoothed at the edges, censored in all the right places. But what if the Headless Horseman wasn't just a ghost? What if the original legend had nothing to do with Ichabod Crane at all? What if the flaming pumpkin was a distraction, and the real horror was much closer to home? The deeper we dig into the origins of this tale, the more we uncover patterns of fear, power, and silence. And once we start peeling back the layers, we may never look at Sleepy Hollow the same way again. O ChatGPT dis. In the misty moors of Ireland long before America existed, tales spread of a Dullahan, a rider whose head rested under one arm, using a human spine as a whip. Travelers whispered that to see his empty helm was to invite death within a day. When Irish immigrants arrived in the early 18th century, they carried this terror across the Atlantic, grafting it onto local superstitions. Unlike the rolling hills of Ireland, New York's Hudson Valley offered dense forests and narrow waterways, perfect for a phantom's ambush. Mini twist. Some records hint that local farmers paid storytellers to inject dread into their rivals' fields as a form of economic warfare. As the Revolutionary War raged, British and Hessian soldiers occupied the valley. Desertion was rampant, and officers weaponized ghost stories to scare deserters back into the ranks. Historians recently uncovered letters ordering camp leaders to spread rumors of a headless specter roaming at night, ensuring that men thought twice before fleeing into the woods. This covert tactic blurred fact and folklore, transforming a supernatural warning into a tool of military control. Mini twist. One Hessian deserter's diary mentions witnessing a flaming figure, but later admits he saw camp lanterns strapped to horseback. By the 1820s, Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow crystallized these nightmares into literature. Yet Irving softened the tale, turning the Dullahan-turned-horseman into a decapitated soldier with a pumpkin head for theatrics. He noted in letters that local newspapers refused to print darker versions, too graphic for polite society. What remains is the sanitized myth, Ichabod's flight, and the shattered pumpkin. But in private drafts, Irving described shadowy riders, trampling entire villages to break resistance against British sympathizers, a stark contrast to the whimsical chase we know. The cultural context deepens when we consider indigenous narratives. The Lenape people spoke of a horned hunter, a spirit collecting lost souls who wandered too close to sacred grounds. Their stories described protective charms and drumbeats that could repel the hunter's wrath. These elements were erased by European storytellers eager for Gothic thrills. Mini twist. Some anthropologists argue that pumpkin may have originally been a mistranslation of war drum, meaning the horseman's warning beat was an ominous cadence, not a glowing jack-o'-lantern. By weaving together European superstition, revolutionary propaganda, literary sanitization, and indigenous lore, we see that the Headless Horseman is more than a spooky mascot. He's a composite figure, born of fear, control, and cultural erasure. Each retelling trimmed darker edges and repurposed symbols to fit new agendas: economic rivalry, military discipline, or mass entertainment. The true terror lies not in the phantom itself, but in what the legend hides from us: a history of manipulation and silence. In the earliest whispers of Sleepy Hollow, long before Irving's playful pumpkin, the Headless Horseman served a darker master. Local lore hints that wealthy landowners, threatened by squatters and poor farmers, commissioned masked riders to terrorize those who dared claim the fertile soil. Without a name or face, the spectre became the perfect enforcer. They struck under cover of fog, trampling fences and burning barns, sending a message that no one would dare challenge property lines again. This spectre was less ghost, more hired gun, wielding fear as currency. Mini twist. Some court records mention anonymous payments in gold coins to the rider for nocturnal raids. Rumors also suggest Ichabod Crane was not merely a timid schoolteacher, but a self-serving informant for these elites. His journals, lost to time, supposedly chronicled sightings and betrayals, penned in exchange for brandy and better grades for favored students. When he vanished, whispers claimed the horseman sought repayment for Crane's transgressions against the oppressed. In this telling, Crane's fate was sealed not by random terror, but by a reckoning. Mini twist. One fragment of Crane's notes describes a secret meeting with a masked rider beneath a full moon, negotiating his silence. As the tale spread, the horseman's identity blurred between myth and man. Some chroniclers insist the rider once had a name, a deserter named Klaus Vogel, whose execution by local militia was meant as spectacle, warning to others. They beheaded him in public, leaving his corpse on display. His spirit, they said, returned each anniversary to claim those complicit in his murder. Halloween festivals today dance around this origin, but the original horror was a ritual sacrifice to uphold law and order. Mini twist: village elders still burn an effigy in Vogel's likeness, hoping to stave off his wrath. This version casts Ichabod not as victim, but as accomplice. He transcribed contracts in shaky script, recorded lords' quotas of spectral patrols, and tipped the horseman toward any rumored rebel. The flaming pumpkin was likely a lantern strapped to the horse's saddle, meant to blind and disorient, not frighten with supernatural fire. When Crane failed to turn in a final report, the horseman delivered justice in kind. Where tales celebrate a ghostly chase, the reality was a cold-blooded execution masked by folklore. The headless rider became a convenient scapegoat, bloodless, in legend yet drenched in the sins of the living. By unraveling this thread of vengeance and control, the horseman transforms from folk horror into a symbol of unchecked power. The lines between hunter and hunted blur. Morality shifts in shadow and mud. Ichabod's disappearance is no longer a spooky anecdote, but a cautionary tale about colluding with oppression. And as we peel back each layer, the question remains: who truly rides at midnight and what debts remain unpaid? The jack-o'-lantern that now defines the Headless Horseman was once no mere decoration, but a symbol of power. Lantern makers in the Hudson Valley crafted them from hollowed gourds, embedding mirrors inside so the light would catch unsuspecting eyes and disorient riders, an ancient trick of psychological warfare. In hushed workshops, artisans whispered that the flicker represented a false face, concealing rage and retribution. Each glow in the night became not a ghostly beacon, but a warning of ruthless intent. Mini twist: some gourds were carved with Lenape symbols intended to invoke ancestral protection, but those carvings were often sanded smooth by landowners who wanted unchallenged authority. Silence amplified the terror. Communities agreed to never speak openly of the horseman's true purpose. Families passed down softened tales to protect children, they said, but the elders knew better. A whispered vow to forget was sealed at town meetings, where accusations against the rider were paraded but never recorded. The gaps in official minutes stand as proof. Entire evenings were struck through, as if the horseman's presence demanded erasure. Mini twist: historian Margaret Haynes found a sealed codex hinting at rituals performed to appease the spectre, offerings of whiskey and livestock at crossroads under full moons. On a deeper level, the Headless Horseman embodies America's unresolved traumas. The horrors of war, land theft and social stratification were too shameful to admit. By portraying the horseman as supernatural, communities transferred guilt onto a phantom, evading accountability. Psychologists argue that this displacement allowed settlers to sleep at night, turning real violence into cautionary myth. Mini twist: modern descendants of early settlers report genetic markers linked to PTSD, suggesting ancestral fear may linger in their DNA. The riding figure also mirrors the silenced voices of the Lenape. Their prayers and warnings, once spoken in sacred tongues, vanished beneath colonial laws. Where their drumbeats once echoed, now only echoes of hooves remain. Museums display Lenape artifacts without context. Their true stories are locked away. The horseman's headless form thus stands as a grotesque monument to erasure, a reminder that some histories ride hidden beneath our feet. The final symbol is silence itself. By refusing to speak the full truth, Sleepy Hollow ensured its own legend lived on, untouchable and reshaped by every generation. The emptiness where the rider's head should be is a void in our collective memory, waiting to be filled by acknowledgement and reconnection. Only by naming the unspeakable can we reclaim the past and break the cycle of haunting. The Headless Horseman was never meant merely to scare children or entertain tourists. He carries a message for every generation that dares ignore the voices, silenced by fear. When land was stolen, promises broken, and communities hushed under the threat of retribution, the decapitated rider became a living warning. Unchecked power leaves lives fragmented, identities erased. This is the real horror Sleepy Hollow hides in its fog. the way myth can mask crimes against humanity and twist collective memory into comfortable lies. Yet the warning goes deeper. Each time we retell this tale without acknowledging its roots, we reenact the same erasure. We turn victims into ghosts and oppressors into legends. The void where the horseman's head should be reflects the void in our conscience when we look away from injustice. His lantern's flicker is not supernatural. It's the spark of conscience we dare not kindle. If we remain silent, the spectre rides on, haunting our future with the same patterns of exploitation and betrayal. But there is hope in the telling. To name the true horrors beneath the legend is to exorcise them from our collective soul. By learning who the real rider was, whether a Hessian soldier, a betrayed deserter, or a masked enforcer of the wealthy, we reclaim agency over our history. We shine a light into the void and refuse to let it swallow us. In doing so, we transform the horseman from a symbol of fear into a beacon of accountability, reminding us that memory itself can be a form of resistance. The final question lingers. When the sun rises over Sleepy Hollow, what will we choose to remember? Will we cling to the sanitized ghost story that comforts us, or will we dare to face the truths buried in the darkness? The answer shapes not only the past we inherit, but the future we build. And like Ichabod's vanished home, the path forward can disappear if we fail to confront what the legend warns us about. At its heart, the Headless Horseman urges us to lift our voices where fear once silenced them. His empty helm calls for us to fill the void with truth, empathy, and justice. Only then can we transform haunting into healing and ensure that no one else pays the price for our silence. If this journey into the shadows moved you, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Your support fuels our deep dives into forgotten truths. Drop a comment below sharing which part shocked you the most, and join our community of truth seekers. Consider becoming a member today to help us uncover more hidden histories and keep these stories alive. More revelations await, and the next one could change the way you see your own world. Don't miss out.